Keyframes in DaVinci Resolve are one of the basic building blocks to creating cool and unique videos. If you're not sure what a keyframe is, a keyframe essentially allows you to make changes to your video or your audio or your color grading over time. My name's Jason Yadlowski. Today's video is sponsored by Motion Array, and I'm going to be using some sample clips here to show you how we can create keyframes in the Edit tab for our videos. I'll also show you how we can jump into the Color tab and create some keyframes there that will allow us to change the color over time for our videos. Then we're going to jump into Fairlight and take a look at audio keyframing, how we can use some basic keyframes to make audio changes over time. And I'll briefly mention how you can use automation to change any parameter that you want with any effect. And finally, we'll jump into Fusion and I'll show you how you can easily create keyframes there to work with your animations or your visual graphics, whatever you might be doing in Fusion. So let's take the mystery out of keyframes here, and I'm going to show you how you can do all these things right here in DaVinci Resolve. Let's go. So in DaVinci Resolve here, I'm in the Edit tab. I've got a couple of clips in my timeline, and let's start to talk about how do we work with keyframes. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and open up my inspector. Now in my inspector, you notice we have these little diamonds over here next to a lot of our items, right? And that is what's going to allow us to set a keyframe. Now, a keyframe is basically saying, okay, at this point, start making the change, whatever that change might be. And then at your next keyframe, it says either stop making that change or change and do something else. So in this video clip right here, it's two people coming up a little hill there. They're hiking. So let's say we want to add in a zoom here. So if I wanted to use keyframes to make a zoom, what I could do is select my clip. Let's say I want the zoom to start, let's say right here. I'm going to come over to my transform section in my inspector, and because I only want the zoom to change, I only want to click the little diamond that's right next to the zoom section. Now, if I wanted all of these items in the transform section to have a keyframe, so to set a point to start making a change, I could just click this top one right here, and it's going to set a keyframe for all of these. But in this case, I just want to keyframe the zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the zoom. Now you can see when it's red, that means I put a keyframe on the clip. And if you're not sure, like, how do I know where the keyframe is? I can't see it on the clip. Well, in order to see where your keyframes are, we need to make our clips a little bit bigger first. There's a few ways that you can do that. One way is to come to your timeline view options. And right down here, you can make your video track bigger. Or if you're just in your timeline here, you can use the middle mouse wheel on your mouse, hold the shift key, and just scroll in and it'll zoom it up for you. Now on this first clip right here, you notice we have a little backwards S line here, and then we've got a little diamond. Now this diamond is going to show us the keyframe. So if I go ahead and click on that little diamond, now we see a section called transform, which is going to match our transform section up here in our inspector. And if I move my playhead a little bit, we see the keyframe right there. That's where I put the keyframe. So the next thing I want to do is move ahead on this clip to wherever I want the change to stop. So let's say I move ahead a little bit to right there, and that's where I want it to stop zooming in. Now, in order to set another keyframe right here to make that change, all I have to do is come in my inspector, and I can either punch in a number or I can click, hold, and drag to increase my zoom. Now, another way that you can do it just for, ease of use here, if I undo that with Command or Control Z, if you want to visually drag it on the screen, you can come over here in this little toolbar right here, click your drop down, and you can click on the transform. If I zoom out here, now I can just click, hold, and drag to wherever I want, and now that keyframe is going to be set down here in my timeline. So I can turn this off, and if I play through this clip, as soon as the playhead hits that first keyframe, it's going to start to zoom, and Resolve figures out, okay, well, how much time do I have to go from this zoom that we started with to the zoom that I want to finish with? And Resolve will do that for you. Now, one of the cool things is, let's say I don't want it to take that long. I want it to happen a little bit quicker. When we're looking at our clip in our timeline here, and we see these little keyframe dots, we could just click, hold, and drag on it to move it wherever we want. So now we're still going to end up at the same zoom level, but now the time that it takes to get there is going to be a whole lot quicker. So if we play through our clip again, you're going to notice that it zooms a whole lot quicker, right? And even if we move it closer, Resolve will automatically figure out how long it needs to take to get from one keyframe to the next at the zoom level that you choose. So we're making changes over time, and we're setting where do we want it to start and where do we want it to end. So all of the different tools that we have here in our inspector with these diamonds allow us to keyframe them and make changes to those items over time. So let's say we wanted to maybe pan this as well as the zoom. So if I come to where the zoom ends And let's say I want to set a panning keyframe or a position keyframe. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the position keyframe, and it will automatically set it at whatever my settings are. Now I'm going to go ahead a little bit, maybe like here. And then I'm going to take my X and I'm just going to change that and move it this way a little bit. Make sure I stay with the frame on my screen here. So here's what it looks like. It's going to zoom in, and then it's going to start to pan to the right. Now you notice it's very linear on how this is happening, right? It's just kind of like a steady change over time. But what if maybe you wanted to add a little more interest to that? You wanted to have it ease in and ease out. We could do that really easily here as well. So that's where this little reverse S shape icon is going to come in handy. So if I go ahead and click on that, I'm just going to make my timeline a little bit bigger here so we've got more space. You're going to notice we have a graph down here. Now this graph is going to show you your keyframes. You can see that our keyframes line up right here and right here. And currently I'm looking at my X position, right? Which is how I did the panning. If I click on this little drop down right here, I can change it to any of these other parameters that we would see in the inspector that we might keyframe. So I did change the zoom, so I can turn off these other items if I wanted to. Or in the little graph here, we can kind of see ghosted in the background here, the zoom Y change. So we can click on that and we can see the curve for our zoom Y. Now let's say I want the zoom to be have a little easing in and out of it. In order to do that, all I have to do is select one of the keyframes, and then I want to change the keyframe type right up here. I can click this guy, and you can see right here, it is going to, let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here for you. It's going to put a little curve on there, and I can also select the one up the top. And now it kind of eases in and eases out. And here's what that looks like. So it makes it a little bit more gradual, a little bit more pleasing to look at instead of just start, stop, and it's just steady all the way through. So we call that easing in and easing out. Now in this little graph down at the bottom here, you can also add in more keyframes if you want. We can also make changes if you want. Now it might be a little confusing, but let's say maybe we wanted to zoom more. Instead of changing it in the inspector, I can just come to my keyframe, make sure my playhead's over it, and I can just grab the line right here and make it bigger. And now when I come back and I play through it, it's going to zoom a whole lot quicker because we're zooming in more. Eases into it faster and slows down. So you can make changes right here in this little graph as well. Now, if you only want to move around the keyframes, you don't necessarily need to open the little graph here. You can click on that little reverse S, close it. And if you have the diamond open here, we do have transform, but if we click on this arrow, now we see the different tools that we've transformed, right? So if I were to add in something else, let's say maybe I wanted to add in a crop. So I'm going to add a keyframe for my crop over here in the inspector, and you can see it adds in the section for cropping. And then let's say I move ahead a little bit, and then we're going to crop it way in just so we can see what it's looking like. So now I know we don't see anything up here, but it's just so you kind of understand what's happening here. So now in the cropping section, we can see we've got our super big zoom there. And now as it crops, it's going to bring in those edges just like that. Now it took a little bit because we actually started off the screen and that crop is coming in from off the screen. So that's why it takes a little while because it's coming from out here because we're zoomed in so far and then eventually gets to there. And if you wanted to move it around, you could just click on any one of these keyframes, move it to a different spot within the clip, and then you're good to go. And again, if you want to make some changes to the cropping, again, make it ease in and ease out. You can select the little reverse S, make sure you're on the crop, and then you can see we've got our line right here. You can select it, change your easing if you'd like to, and you can always change it even more. If you want to grab a point, pull it out, do different things, you can do that right there. So on this next clip right here, let's just take a quick look at how we can make some changes using keyframes really quick. I'm going to go through it about as fast as I would normally do it. So let's say on this clip right here, I want this to start actually a little zoomed in just from the beginning here, right? So I can zoom it in before I set any keyframes so that the whole clip is already zoomed in. So now let's add in some keyframes just to make some changes. So I'm going to come to my transform section. I'm going to click the top keyframe here so that all of my items here have a keyframe just in case I want to change any of them as we go along. So now I want to have a little bit of a zoom in. So I'm going to go ahead a few frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 frames. And now I'm just going to come and zoom it in. And now we see that I made a keyframe, but only for the zoom because I didn't change anything else yet. So let's say I came up ahead here and now I want to change the vertical position. So now I want to keep it where it's at. So I would set a keyframe for my position. So I'm just going to click that again. And then I'm gonna go ahead a few frames here. We have the splash to there, and I'm gonna lower the clip down, but I don't wanna come out of the frame there, kinda like that. Gonna go ahead a little more. And then let's say right here, I want to have the Y go back down in position. So I'm gonna move that back, and it's gonna automatically create a keyframe for me right here. And then if I wanted the zoom to stay at this point, but now I wanted to start to change it, I'm gonna go ahead and click the keyframe on the zoom. Gonna move ahead a little bit, and I'm gonna go back to 1. So here's what that kind of looks like. We've got our bean falling. We zoom in really quick. We move up, we move down, and we zoom back out. Now, of course, you can make it more precise, make it better, but that's the basic idea of how you're gonna add keyframes to your video clip. Then if you wanna smooth them out, we can click open our different icons here. And one of the cool things is if you were to have your playhead over top of one of the keyframes, we can see which ones are active here by looking at our inspector. And if they have a red color to them, we know that those have keyframes at that spot. If they don't have red to them, we know there's no keyframe for that item at that particular spot on our clip. But if I wanted to ease in and ease out of those clips, I could just right click on the keyframe and say ease in and ease out. So what does that do? Instead of having to open up this little S key right here and change it here like we did previously, it's gonna do it for me. So if I came back here and then I were to right click, ease in and out, I know it's small, but it did make the change there. And then we can ease in and out our other one, and it'll automatically go to the right keyframe and make that change for us. So that is the basics of keyframing with our clips. Now, it might be a little confusing. It's gonna take you some time just to get used to how it works, when to click on the keyframe and when not to, but hopefully I explained it clear enough here for you so that you can get started and practice with some basic keyframing in any clip you have. It could be anything. It doesn't even have to be a clip. You could use a generator here in Resolve to just make a sample that you can practice with to zoom in, zoom out, move things around, and just practice using the keyframes because it's going to take a little bit to get used to. At least it did for me when I first got started. So now let's jump into the color tab and talk about some keyframes in the color tab. Before we get into that, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that is Motion Array. I've been using Motion Array for a long time. They've got a ton of great assets. It's like a one-stop shop for all the stuff that you need to make your video awesome. I love getting stock footage from there, and the videos that you're seeing in today's examples came right from Motion Array. I also get music and sound effects from them, and the music that we're going to be looking at in Fairlight today is from Motion Array as well. But by far, I think one of my favorite things from Motion Array is all the cool overlays that they have. I mean, it's just like limitless, the amount of assets that they have there that just help take your videos to the next level, because let's be honest, we all don't have time to sit down and create all these things from scratch. So there's a ton of talented people out there that have created a great wealth of awesome assets for us to use. They put them on Motion Array, and we're able to sign up for Motion Array. They even have a free account. You can jump on there and grab some freebies if you want and try it out and see how it works. And I did that too in the beginning, and it was great. But if you're looking for a one-stop shop for all the assets you need to make your videos awesome, sound effects, music, footage, templates, all that good stuff, check out Motion Array. I'll leave a link down below, and a big thank you to Motion Array for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's get back to those keyframes. Let's go. So I've got this clip right here in my timeline. I'm gonna jump over into the color tab. So in the color tab here, we can make changes over time to all of the different things that we can do here in the color tab. So let's say maybe we want this to go from color to black and white. So in order to do that and to keyframe it, what I could do is I could come down along the bottom of the screen here. We can open up our keyframes. And in the color tab, this is what the keyframes look like. So you've got your master, and then you've got your corrector 1, and then sizing. So corrector 1 is going to be our first node right here. So when we look under corrector 1 here, corrector 1 represents this node. If I had another node and I added a second one in, we'd have corrector number 2. So these are how we're going to keyframe changes. So in this case, if you know what item it is that you want to keyframe, you can see we have all the different kinds of things that we can do here. You could keyframe just your one specific thing if that's what you want to do. Or if you want to just keyframe everything, so make sure you get all your changes, you can just click on the top icon, the little diamond right next to corrector, and then you can see where that is. So let's say I want my video to start to go black and white right where they raise their hand. So like right about there. So I am working on corrector 1 right here. And what I want to do is set a keyframe for my color corrector because I'm going to be changing the color of my clip. So what you can do is just come over to saturation here, and I'm just going to drop the saturation to 0, but I don't want it to be at 0 already. So I'm just going to give it a little wiggle there and bring it back to 50. And you can see it set a keyframe right here for me automatically. So now let's go ahead 1 second. I'm going to hold Shift and my arrow key to jump ahead 1 second. And this is where I want it to be completely black and white. So I'm going to click on my saturation, bring that all the way down to 0. So now you can see in the keyframes here, we have it fading from one keyframe with full color to the second keyframe that is black and white. So let's play through it. You can see it up here. Here's what it looks like. Fades to black and white. Now it's real easy to move these keyframes if you want. You can just click, hold, and drag on it to move it wherever you want to move it, make it longer or shorter of a change. So these are called dynamic keyframes because it makes the change gradually over time. But what if you wanted to go from something like this to make the change immediately like that? Instead of using a dynamic keyframe, what you might want to do is use a static keyframe. So let's just say I add in a 0 right there. And my next keyframe, I'm going to put this back to 50. And we can see that it made it a dynamic keyframe. So I'm just going to right click on it, or select it, right click, and say change to static keyframe. And I'm also going to change the one before it, static keyframe. So our picture here is going to fade to black and white, and then boom, jump right back to color. So in the color page, a static keyframe makes the change like that, and a dynamic keyframe is going to allow you to change it over time. Now, one other thing to know about the keyframes here is that you can also change the easing of the keyframe just like you could in the edit page. In order to get to that easing options there, you can right click on any one of your keyframes, and we can come down to change dynamic attributes. So in here, this allows us to set a little bit of easing if we wanted to, right there, and maybe a little easing out, and we could just click OK. So now if we look at our video, kind of eases in a little bit quicker. We can always select our next keyframe there, change dynamic attributes here, make it the same. So you can adjust the easing in and easing out of the keyframe if you want to right here in the color page. Now you can keyframe anything that you want here in the color page by using the correct icon. You don't have to do everything. You can do some things. You can do the open effects. You can turn them on and off if you want to just see what the difference is here between the changes that you made versus what it looked like originally. You can lock it if you make the changes and then you don't want anything to change. But a really cool feature here of being able to keyframe your color changes could be any kind of color change. Anything that you can do here in the color tab could be keyframed to make it change over time. And again, just like in the edit page, it's going to take a little bit of playing with it, a little bit of time to figure it out and understand how it works, when to click on the keyframes and stuff. Again, it took me a little while. I was kind of confused in the beginning, but you just got to play with it, try it out, and then you'll start to pick it up and understand it the more you work with it. So now let's jump into Fairlight. As the audio guy, love me some Fairlight, and I'm going to show you some of the things you can keyframe in the same way that we're doing the color page and the edit page. And I'm also going to show you how you can keyframe any other audio parameter. And when I say keyframe, I'm putting it in air quotes here, keyframe, because we're actually automating. I'm just going to give you an overview of that. So let's jump into Fairlight. Jumping into Fairlight, the musical note's at the bottom here. So I have an audio clip in my timeline here. I'm going to just select it real quick and right click. We're going to normalize our audio levels here. Say normalize. Zoom in on my timeline here a little bit. So let's say we want to add some keyframes. What keyframes can we add in a similar way to the keyframes that we've already looked at? Well, when it comes to audio, there's less options that you can keyframe in the same manner that we just did for video, for example. So if we look in our inspector right here, I'm going to turn off my mixer for the moment, we can keyframe our volume and our pan. Those are going to be the only two items that you can keyframe the way we've kind of already been keyframing. So let's just take a look at that real quick. Now, in the beginning of this music track here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I want to keyframe it so that I can have it come up a little bit louder, a little bit slower, right? Now, you could always grab the top of your clip right here and fade it in like that, but we're talking keyframes, so let's do it using keyframes. So at the beginning of my clip right here, let's say I want to start with the volume at 0. So I'm going to go ahead, click my keyframe, and then I'm going to bring this volume all the way down to 0. Then I'm going to come ahead a little bit, and let's say now I want to bring it up to whatever volume I want it at. So all I have to do is come ahead, and I can come in my inspector and just click, hold, and drag, or punch in a number to raise up my audio. So now it's going to fade that audio in based on the keyframes that I had. So here's what that sounds like. So let's adjust that a little bit because that was a little short. In order to move a keyframe here in Fairlight, I can just click on it. And if I hold my shift key, it'll allow me to drag it straight over without being able to go up and down. If I let go of my shift key, then I can move it up and down as well as left and right. So let's say I do something like that. And now I notice, well, that's probably a little too loud because it's over 0, right? So I'm going to just come over on this section of my keyframe and drop that volume down a little bit. So right about there looks good. So here's what that sounds like. And now let's say maybe I want that volume to go back down. I'm going to go ahead and click add another keyframe from my inspector, move ahead a little bit, and then I can add another keyframe if I want, or I can just drag this down to 0 and it's automatically going to add the keyframe and fade it down. Now, why couldn't I add a keyframe right here automatically? And this is going to apply whether you're in the edit page here, the color page, doesn't matter. If I'm at a point right here and I just go ahead and make a change, you can see it's making that change and moving that keyframe. But what you want to do is set a start point and then an end point. So the start point, a lot of times you're going to have to come to a point in your timeline and then click the keyframe where you want that change to start. But if I move ahead a little, it's already holding constant at this spot right here that I set the keyframe at. Then I can just make the change, whether it's volume, color, zoom, whatever it is, and it'll automatically add in the keyframe for me. I'm just going to get rid of those 2 keyframes there, but that's kind of how it works, right? You need to set the first one, and then the second one, you can just make the change that you want, and it's going to automatically set a keyframe for you. Again, that works with audio, with video, with color, Fusion, whatever it is, it all works the same when it comes to keyframes. Now, if you wanted to add in some easing to your audio keyframe here, we could select our keyframe here, come up to your volume or your pan. You can right click on here and you can ease in and ease out. And you can see it's going to add in the handles there for us. We can adjust it, pull it out, however we might want. In addition to doing the curve right here in Fairlight, you could also do it in the edit tab. So in the edit tab, again, with your audio, just like with your video tracks, you're going to see the little reverse S there, and you could just select one of your keyframes there. You can change it to whatever type you want and adjust your easing there. Either way works out just fine. So that's your basic keyframes for volume, and the pan would work exactly the same way for the keyframes. If you ever want to delete keyframes, you can just select it, hit delete, or you can hit the little reset button that's right up here in the inspector. Either way works out just fine. Now, when it comes to your audio, you can keyframe, and by air quotes keyframe, I mean automate, because in audio world, they call it automation, to make changes over time to other audio parameters. For example, the EQ, you want that to change over time, or maybe you want, an effect to change over time. We do that using automation, but you can kind of think about it like keyframes because it's doing the same thing. They just call it something different and the process is a little different. I'm just going to show you real quick one example here with the EQ, how we can make changes over time using automation for your audio. So in Fairlight here, I'm going to go ahead and close my inspector. I'm going to open up my mixer. And let's say on this track right here, I want to automate changes for my EQ over time. So this is going to be a more advanced kind of tool that you might use, but I want to show you how it works just so you got an idea that it's there. First thing I need to do, toggle on automation. Next, I want to turn on my automation controls. Now these are some of the settings, and in this case, we want to use our EQ. So I'm going to enable the EQ. Down on my audio track 1, I'm going to click this little drop down. We're going to come down, say EQ. And I'm going to choose a band. Let's just say I'm going to do band 6 just so I can make a big change here and show you what it's doing. So I'm going to say frequency. I'm going to open up my EQ here. And now what I want to do is I want to start with my EQ. I'm going to turn on band 6. I'm going to pull it all the way down here because I want it to kind of open up the EQ as the clip goes along. So now all I have to do is click on the little reverse S icon right here, which means I'm ready to record any changes. So this is going to happen in real time. I'm going to hit play. Then I'm going to make the change in my EQ, and DaVinci Resolve is going to record that for me. So here's how we do it. Now I just hit play. Made my change over time. Now it looks a little weird here because of going from way down the EQ all the way up. It's just kind of how it shows it there, but it essentially fades up. So if I play through that clip again, you can watch the EQ. And it's a great way to ease into your music versus just fading it up, right? A little more interesting there. And that's how you would keyframe the EQ. Even though there's no actual keyframes, we can see that the automation was written in here, and all these little dots are like a little keyframe on our audio clip. Now, if it's not as smooth as if you want, you could always go back and edit this, but that's a little more advanced and for another video. I just wanted to show you that it's possible to make changes like this with any audio parameter. Anything. I mean anything. All right, let's jump into Fusion now, and I'm just going to show you how to make some simple keyframes there. So in Fusion here, I've got my clip with our couple walking in the sunset here, and let's say I want to add in a soft glow. So I have a soft glow node right here. I'm going to use Shift and just drag it down onto my node tree here, and now we can see it's a nice soft glow. But let's say maybe we want it to start out like this, right? Or maybe even make it more glowy, right? And we want that to fade out and turn off so that we can see the couple in the original shot. So in order to do that, I'm going to come to the beginning of my clip right here. I want to set some keyframes. Now, each effect or tool that you might use here in Fusion might look a little bit different on how it works with the keyframes, but this is the basic idea. So I've got my soft glow selected. I have my inspector open, and the gain is what I'm going to want to change, because if I drag this all the way down, we can see eventually it turns off. Or we could even do it with the glow size and with the gain. So let's bring up the gain, the glow size there and the gain. And now this is where I want my clip to start. So I'm going to select the keyframe for the things that I'm going to want to change. So I'm going to click a keyframe for the gain as well as the glow size. So now let's say I want to go ahead a bunch of frames. I don't know, you pick however many you want. And now I want it to stay the same until I get to this point. So I need to add another keyframe in. And that tells Resolve, hey, from the start where we set our first keyframe up until where the playhead is now, keep everything the same, because I have the same parameters on the first keyframe and the second keyframe, so don't make any changes. But now from this second keyframe moving forward, I want to make some changes. So I'm going to come ahead a little bit more, and you can see where we add a keyframe on the timeline here in Fusion, you'll get this little white tick mark. Let's say at this point in my timeline here, I'm going to bring my glow down to 0, and I'm going to bring my gain down to 0. So now we're back to the original clip. And if we move ahead a little more, you see we have another keyframe that was placed right there at frame 215. So if we bring our playhead back and we play through it, here's what that looks like. And you can see in between the two keyframes, our gain and our glow change, which is exactly what we want. Now, if we want to adjust our keyframes, we can come to the keyframes right here at the top, and this will show us our different keyframes. We can click on this little guy to zoom all, and we can see these are the items that we're changing. So when we look at our keyframe area here, let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger, we can see that the time is indicated by the numbers on the top. We've got our median 1, which is right here. We've got our soft glow, which is what we made changes to, and you have your media out. So soft glow, that's where we made the changes, and here are the two different items that we made changes to, the gain and the glow size. And you can zoom in using this tool right here. If you want to make changes to how long those are or where the keyframes are, you can grab it and move it around. If you want to move an individual one, just hover over it. You'll get your little pointer there. You can drag it out if you want. If you want to ease your different keyframes in and out, we can close down our keyframes and open up our spline. I'm just going to go ahead and tick on my soft glow here. Do a little zoom all so we can see everything. And now what we can do is select all of our points by just windowing over them. Once they're all selected here, just hit Shift S, and it's going to automatically smooth them out for you. Now you can come in here and adjust them if you want. That's up to you, but if I leave them like this, here's what that looks like in our viewer up here. And it just eases in and out. So you can do that really easily in the spline editor. And it's kind of like looking at the little graphs in the edit page and how we adjusted them and made them ease in and out right there. So that is some keyframe basics for you here in DaVinci Resolve when it comes to edit, color, fusion, and Fairlight. It's going to take you a little while to understand how they work, especially if you're not familiar with keyframes. If you have a little bit of experience with keyframes, it's probably similar to what you're used to. But I know when I started using keyframes, it was frustrating. I was like, why is this not working? I don't know when I'm clicking, when I should do what, and it was just confusing. So hopefully this helps clear it up a little bit for you guys, and you're able to kind of go through, practice with a few things. Like I said, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a video clip, could be anything. But being able to use keyframes in these different areas of your video are just going to help take it to the next level, help kind of make things look a little more interesting, and allow you to do more things with your video, your audio, your color, and your visual effects. So if you have questions on any part of the keyframing process, feel free to drop a comment down below. Happy to help you out if you get a little stuck, because I know I got stuck a lot in the beginning too. So with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. A big thank you to Motion Ray, the sponsor of today's video. If you're interested in some footage, sound effects, templates, royalty-free music, sound effects. I think I already said sound effects. AI voiceovers, plugins, they have all kinds of stuff. It's a great one-stop shop. Motion graphics, overlays, all that kind of stuff. I love everything that they got over there at Motion Array. You can even get a free account and go get some freebies over there. And that's what I did for a long time too, before I had a full account there. So check that out. Thank you, Motion Array, for sponsoring today's video. And with that said, I will see you in the next video. All right, guys, take care. Bye.